Get on your knees now. The command cracked through the night air sharp enough to make a nearby car alarm chirp once and die. Naomi Hayes didn't move. Red and blue lights washed over her face in slow pulses, painting her skin in cold color, then draining it away again. The asphalt beneath her feet still held the day's heat, rising in faint waves that smelled like rubber and dust, and somewhere behind the police cruisers a street lamp flickered, buzzing like it couldn't decide whether to stay alive or give up. She stood beside her car with the door still half open, one hand resting lightly on the frame, the other visible at her side, just like they told her, steady, empty, calm. Across from her, Officer Ryan Whitaker took one slow step closer, his boots pressing gravel into the pavement with a soft crunch that sounded too loud in the silence. His partner stayed back near the cruiser, one hand near the radio, the other hovering just above his belt, eyes locked on Naomi like she might disappear if he blinked. Last warning, Ryan said, his voice lower now, tighter, like he was trying to keep control of something slipping just beneath the surface. The radio on his shoulder crackled faintly with static, a dispatcher's voice cutting in and out, but he didn't look away from her. Naomi's gaze didn't challenge him, didn't drop either. It just held steady, like a reflection that wouldn't break. A few yards away, a couple stood frozen on the sidewalk, their grocery bags hanging forgotten at their sides, oranges pressing against thin plastic like they might burst through. No one spoke. Even the distant traffic seemed to hush, tires rolling softer, engines fading into the background. Naomi exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that didn't rush, didn't panic, just moved through her like it had all the time in the world. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice quiet but clear, the words landing without force yet somehow refusing to be ignored. Ryan's jaw tightened. He had heard that line before, too many times, usually right before things got complicated. His eyes flicked briefly to the car, then back to her. The vehicle matched the description, the timing lined up, the location was right. Everything about this stop made sense. Everything except her. "Step away from the vehicle," he repeated, slower this time, each word spaced out like he was placing them carefully between them. Naomi didn't argue. She didn't rush either. She shifted her weight just slightly, enough to close the car door with a soft click, the sound echoing louder than it should have in the stillness. Her hands remained where they could see them, her posture relaxed but precise, like she understood exactly how this moment could turn and was choosing not to let it. The flicker from the street lamp caught in her eyes for a second, a brief spark that made Ryan hesitate without knowing why. There was no fear there, not the kind he expected, not the kind he was trained to read. It unsettled him more than panic would have. Why isn't she nervous? The thought slid in uninvited, and he pushed it aside, tightening his grip on routine, on protocol, on control. Behind him, his partner shifted, a faint scrape of fabric and gear, then stillness again. Naomi's gaze drifted past them for just a fraction of a second, toward the darker stretch of the street beyond the flashing lights, where shadows pooled thick between parked cars and low hedges. It was subtle, almost nothing, but Ryan caught it. His eyes followed instinctively, scanning the darkness, seeing nothing but still air and quiet shapes. When he looked back at her, she was already facing him again, calm as before, like she hadn't moved at all. The tension stretched tighter, thinner, like a wire pulled to its limit. A breeze moved through the street, carrying the faint scent of cut grass and something metallic, brushing against Naomi's jacket and lifting a strand of her hair before letting it fall again. Ryan took another step forward, slower now, more measured, the distance between them shrinking inch by inch. "Do you understand the situation you're in?" he asked. Not quite a question, not quite a warning. Naomi's lips parted slightly, not to argue, not to plead. "I understand more than you think," she said, just above a whisper. The words didn't rise, didn't push. They settled. Somewhere in the distance, there was a sound. Faint, rhythmic, almost too soft to notice at first. Ryan's head tilted just slightly, his focus splitting for a fraction of a second. Naomi didn't move, didn't react, just stood there, breathing slow, eyes steady, as the night seemed to hold itself in place, waiting for something neither of them had said out loud yet. The sound came again, clearer this time, a steady rhythm cutting through the stillness like a second heartbeat layered beneath the first. Click, 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 not hurried, not chaotic, but controlled, measured, deliberate. Officer Ryan Whitaker's gaze shifted past Naomi Hayes before he could stop himself, scanning the dim stretch of pavement beyond the reach of the cruiser lights where shadows gathered thick between a row of parked cars and a low hedge. His partner noticed it too, posture tightening, shoulders lifting just slightly, as if bracing for something not yet visible. "Do you hear that?" his partner murmured under his breath, voice barely carrying past the static hum of the radio. Ryan did not answer. His attention was split now, half anchored to Naomi, half pulled toward the approaching sound that did not belong to sirens or engines or anything familiar to a routine stop. Naomi remained still, her breathing even, her eyes steady. But there was something else now, something almost imperceptible in the set of her shoulders, not tension, not fear, something closer to anticipation. The red and blue lights swept across her again, catching the faint outline of a small patch on her jacket sleeve, but the glare made it unreadable, just a hint of shape and texture before it disappeared back into shadow. "Ma'am, stay where you are," Ryan said, but the firmness in his voice had softened, edged now with something uncertain. Naomi gave the slightest nod, not in submission, not in defiance, just acknowledgement, as if she had already decided how this moment would unfold. The clicking grew louder, joined now by a low, controlled breathing that carried across the pavement in short, even bursts. It was not the wild panting of stray animals or the uneven scuffle of something lost. It was disciplined, intentional, trained. Ryan's pulse ticked faster, not from panic, but from recognition trying to surface through layers of assumption. His boots shifted again, a subtle adjustment, widening his stance as he angled his body slightly toward the sound, without fully turning his back on Naomi. The bystanders on the sidewalk took a step back almost in unison, grocery bags rustling, one of them whispering something that dissolved into the night before it could be understood. Naomi's voice broke the silence again, softer than before, almost gentle. "They do not respond well to raised voices." Ryan's eyes snapped back to her, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "What are you talking about?" he asked. But the question came slower than it should have, as if part of him already knew the answer was about to reveal itself whether he was ready or not. Naomi did not elaborate. She did not move. She simply shifted her gaze once more toward the darkness behind the cruisers, then back to him, the motion small but deliberate. The sound was close now, close enough that the rhythm of it settled into the space between them, undeniable enough that Ryan's partner finally turned his head fully, squinting into the low light. "Officer," he started, but the word trailed off as shapes began to separate themselves from the shadows. At first, it was only movement, low to the ground, precise, gliding rather than stumbling. Then the outline sharpened. For figures, lean and powerful, stepping into the edge of the flashing lights one by one, their coats catching the red and blue glow in brief pulses that revealed muscle beneath discipline, silence beneath presence. They did not bark. They did not rush. They moved forward with controlled purpose, stopping just short of the cruisers, as if an invisible line had been drawn on the pavement. Ryan felt the shift immediately, not in the environment, but in the balance of it, like the center of gravity had moved without warning. His hand, which had hovered near his belt out of habit, eased slightly, not fully dropping, but no longer poised the same way. The dogs held their positions, heads level, eyes forward, their breathing steady, each one aligned with the others as if they were parts of a single system rather than separate animals. Naomi finally moved, just enough to straighten fully, her shoulders settling into a posture that no longer carried the weight of being cornered, but something else entirely, something composed, something grounded. She did not step toward them. She did not call out. She simply spoke, her voice calm and even, "Stay." The word carried across the space with quiet authority, and the dogs responded instantly, not by advancing, not by retreating, but by holding exactly where they were, as if the command had anchored them to the asphalt itself. Ryan's breath caught for a fraction of a second, not from fear, but from the realization unfolding in front of him piece by piece. This was not chaos. This was control. His gaze shifted from the dogs back to Naomi, then to the faint patch on her sleeve again as the light flickered across it, and this time the shape resolved just enough to register. Not clearly, not fully, but enough to unsettle everything he thought he understood about the situation. The radio crackled again, louder now, the dispatcher's voice cutting through with a request for status, but neither officer responded. The night seemed to pause, suspended between what had been assumed and what was now undeniable, as Naomi stood there, no longer just a figure under flashing lights, but the still center of something far more deliberate than either of them had expected. For a long second, no one moved. The red and blue lights continued their slow sweep across the street, but the energy in the air had shifted, no longer sharp and pressing, now heavy, uncertain, like something important had just changed direction and no one had caught up yet. Officer Ryan Whitaker's eyes stayed locked on the dogs, tracking each small detail, the way their shoulders remained level, the way their breathing never broke rhythm, the way their gaze never wandered. These were not strays. These were not someone's pets that had slipped a fence. These were trained, disciplined, deliberate. His throat tightened slightly as a realization began to take shape, not fully formed yet, but strong enough to make him hesitate. "Ma'am," he started, but the word came out different this time, stripped of command, edged with something closer to caution. Naomi Hayes did not respond immediately. She reached up slowly, deliberately, her fingers brushing the edge of her jacket sleeve, adjusting it just enough that the patch caught the light again. This time it held. The red and blue reflection passed over it, revealing clean stitching, a clear insignia, sharp lines that spoke of structure and authority without needing explanation. Ryan's gaze dropped to it, and for the first time since the stop began, his posture shifted back instead of forward, a subtle step, barely a few inches, but enough to change everything. "You are with a unit," he said, not quite a question, more like a statement he was testing against what he was seeing. Naomi lowered her hand again, her expression unchanged, calm, composed, grounded. "I am," she replied, her voice steady, neither defensive nor proud, just factual. The dogs remained exactly where they were, their presence filling the space without crossing it, like a line drawn in quiet certainty. Ryan's partner let out a breath he had been holding, shoulders easing slightly as he lowered his hand away from his belt. The tension that had once pointed toward Naomi now turned inward, folding back on itself as doubt replaced assumption. The radio crackled again, louder this time, the dispatcher repeating the call for status, asking for confirmation, but Ryan did not answer yet. His attention stayed on Naomi, on the details that no longer fit the version of the situation he had built in his head just minutes ago. "We received a report," he said slowly, choosing each word more carefully now. "Vehicle matching a description, possible involvement in an incident a few blocks over." Naomi nodded once, a small motion, acknowledging the logic without agreeing to the conclusion. "I understand," she said. There was no accusation in her tone, no frustration, just clarity. It unsettled him more than resistance would have. He glanced back at the dogs again, then to the street behind them, then back to her, recalculating, reordering. "Those are military trained," he added, almost to himself, but loud enough to be heard. Naomi's gaze softened just slightly, not in weakness, but in recognition of what he was beginning to see. "Yes," she said. "They are trained to protect and to respond only when necessary." The words settled into the space between them, quiet but heavy with meaning. Ryan swallowed, the weight of the moment pressing in from a different angle now. "And they responded to you," he said. Naomi tilted her head just a fraction. "They responded to the situation," she corrected gently. The distinction hung there, subtle but undeniable. His partner shifted again, this time stepping back toward the cruiser, creating more space without being told. The bystanders on the sidewalk had gone completely still, watching in silence, their earlier tension replaced by something closer to awe, or maybe confusion, unsure of how to process what they were witnessing. Ryan finally reached up to his shoulder, pressing the radio button, but he hesitated before speaking, his eyes still on Naomi, as if waiting for something, permission or confirmation or understanding he could not quite name. Naomi met his gaze evenly. "You can tell them it is a controlled situation," she said, her voice calm, offering him a way forward without forcing it. He nodded once, almost reflexively, then spoke into the radio, his tone measured, different from before. "Dispatch, situation is stable. No immediate threat. Stand by for further update." The response came back quickly, acknowledgement mixed with static, but the urgency had dropped. Ryan lowered his hand, exhaling slowly, the breath leaving him heavier than it had entered. He looked at Naomi again, really looked this time, not as a suspect, not as a problem to solve, but as someone standing in front of him with a context he had missed. "I need to verify a few things," he said, quieter now. The authority still there, but no longer sharp. Naomi gave a small nod. "Of course." She reached into her pocket slowly, deliberately, every movement clear, controlled, transparent, and produced a small card, holding it where he could see it without stepping closer. The light caught it just enough to reveal official markings, structured text, something that aligned with everything else he was beginning to understand. Ryan did not reach for it immediately. Instead, he studied her for another second, the silence stretching just enough to let the realization settle fully. The balance had shifted, not with force, not with confrontation, but with presence, with control, with truth revealed in quiet layers. The dogs remained still, the night held its breath, and for the first time since it began, Ryan Whitaker felt the certainty he had started with slip completely out of his grasp, replaced by something far more humbling. Ryan Whitaker reached forward at last, his fingers closing around the edge of the card Naomi Hayes held out, careful not to brush her hand, careful in a way he had not been minutes ago. The plastic felt firm, official, the kind of material that did not bend under pressure, much like the woman standing in front of him. He angled it slightly under the flashing lights, squinting as the red and blue reflections slid across its surface, distorting the text for a second before settling into something readable. His eyes moved slowly, line by line, absorbing each detail, each credential, each quiet confirmation that what he had assumed had been incomplete from the start. The night seemed to narrow around that small rectangle, everything else fading into a low hum. The distant street lamp, the idle engine of the cruiser, the faint rustle of leaves somewhere beyond the curb. His partner leaned in just slightly from behind, not close enough to crowd, but close enough to catch a glimpse, his earlier tension replaced by a cautious curiosity. "Is that?" he began, but stopped himself, letting the silence carry the rest. Ryan did not answer right away. He flipped the card once, checking the reverse, the seal, the embedded strip that caught the light differently, confirming authenticity in a way that training had taught him to recognize without needing to question it. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed, not dramatically, not in a way that called attention to itself, but enough that the sharp edge from before had softened into something more measured, more aware. Naomi had not moved while he examined it. She stood the same way she had from the beginning, balanced, composed, her presence steady, as if she had seen this shift happen before and knew it would come when it was ready. The dogs behind the cruisers remained exactly where she had left them, their stillness now part of the scene rather than a disruption to it, like pillars holding up a structure that had almost collapsed under its own assumptions. Ryan handed the card back slowly, his movements deliberate, respectful in a way that did not need to be announced. "Thank you," he said, the words quieter than his earlier commands, but heavier with meaning. Naomi took it with the same calm precision, slipping it back into her pocket without breaking eye contact. The radio crackled again, a reminder that the world beyond this moment had not stopped, that there were still calls, still reports, still expectations waiting for an answer. Ryan lifted his shoulders slightly, pressing the button once more. "Dispatch, be advised," he said, his voice steady now, grounded in new information. "Vehicle confirmed not involved. Situation is under control. No further units needed." There was a pause on the other end, a brief hesitation as the update was processed, then a response acknowledging the change, the urgency dissolving into routine. Ryan lowered his hand again, exhaling through his nose, a slow release that seemed to carry more than just breath. He glanced toward the bystanders on the sidewalk, noticing for the first time how still they had remained, how their attention had shifted from fear to something quieter, something closer to witnessing. One of them adjusted their grip on a grocery bag, the plastic crinkling softly, a small, ordinary sound that felt almost out of place after everything that had just unfolded. Ryan turned back to Naomi, the weight of the moment settling differently now, not pressing outward, but inward, reflective. "I apologize for the misunderstanding," he said, the words careful, chosen, not forced but not easy either. Naomi's expression did not change much, but there was a slight softening around her eyes, not approval, not dismissal, just acknowledgement. You were doing your job, she replied, her tone even, offering him a path that did not trap him in the mistake, but did not erase it either. The distinction lingered between them, quiet but clear. Ryan nodded once, accepting it, though something in his posture suggested he understood it went deeper than procedure. His partner stepped back another half step, creating space that had not been there before, the shift subtle but visible. Naomi turned her head slightly toward the dogs, her voice carrying just enough to reach them without rising. Come, she said. The response was immediate, but controlled, the four animals moving forward in unison, their steps light against the asphalt, their presence powerful without needing to prove it. They stopped a few feet from her, sitting almost simultaneously, their attention fixed on her, awaiting the next cue. The streetlights caught the lines of their forms, highlighting the discipline in their stillness, the trust in their posture. Ryan watched closely, not with suspicion now, but with a kind of respect that had replaced it, recognizing the level of training, the bond, the control that extended beyond commands into something deeper. Naomi reached down, clipping the leashes to their collars one by one, her movements efficient, practiced, each motion completing without hesitation. When she straightened again, the scene felt different, not just because of what had been revealed, but because of what had been understood. The flashing lights still painted the street in red and blue, but the urgency had drained from them, leaving only the echo of what had almost happened and what had been avoided. Ryan shifted his weight slightly, no longer blocking her path, no longer framing her within the boundaries he had set earlier. You are clear to go, he said, the statement simple, but carrying a weight that acknowledged more than just the end of a stop. Naomi gave a small nod, not rushed, not lingering, just enough to mark the moment. As she turned toward her car, the dogs moved with her, perfectly aligned, their presence no longer an unknown force, but a quiet extension of who she was. The night resumed its normal rhythm slowly, the distant traffic returning, the street lamp buzzing steadily, the bystanders beginning to move again as if released from a held breath. And standing there under the fading pulse of the cruiser lights, Ryan Whitaker remained still for a second longer, the image of the moment settling into memory, not as a confrontation, but as something else entirely, something that would stay with him long after the lights went dark. The cruiser lights dimmed as Ryan Whitaker reached back and flicked the switch, and the red and blue glow that had once dominated the street faded into a softer amber wash from the remaining street lamps, leaving behind a quiet that felt heavier than the noise that came before. Naomi Hayes opened her car door again, the hinge giving a faint creak that sounded louder now that the tension had drained from the air, and for a moment she paused, one hand resting on the frame, the other lightly holding the leashes, her dogs sitting at her side in perfect stillness, their focus still locked on her, as if the world outside her commands did not exist. Ryan watched her, not with suspicion, not even with authority anymore, but with a kind of attention he had not offered at the beginning of the stop, the kind that comes only after something shifts beneath your understanding and leaves you standing in a different place than where you started. His partner moved back toward the cruiser, opening the door and leaning in briefly, the soft rustle of paperwork and the low hum of the radio filling the space where sharp commands had once lived. The bystanders had begun to drift away, their footsteps slow at first, as if unsure whether the moment was truly over, then gradually picking up pace as normal life resumed around them, grocery bags swinging lightly, voices returning in quiet murmurs that carried down the block. Naomi finally slid into the driver's seat, but she did not start the engine right away. Instead, she looked up through the open window, her eyes meeting Ryan's one last time, not confrontational, not seeking anything, just present. You might want to double-check that report, she said calmly, her voice carrying just enough to reach him without effort. Ryan's brow tightened slightly, not defensive, but thoughtful. What do you mean? He asked. Naomi tilted her head just a fraction, as if choosing how much to say. The vehicle you are looking for, she said. It is not the same color under streetlight glare. It reads darker than it is during the day. And the license plate frame you are expecting is not metal. It is plastic. It reflects differently. Ryan blinked once, processing, his mind replaying the description that had come through the radio earlier, the details he had accepted without question, now shifting under the weight of what she was pointing out. His partner leaned back out of the cruiser at that moment, holding a tablet in one hand. "Hey, Ryan," he called. "Dispatch just updated the alert. Suspect vehicle was spotted 2 blocks east, heading toward Maple. Different make than we thought." Ryan turned halfway toward him, then back to Naomi, the connection landing fully now, not as a coincidence, but as clarity. Naomi gave a small nod, as if confirming something already known. "Situations change fast," she said. "Details matter." The simplicity of the statement settled into the space between them, heavier than any accusation would have been. Ryan let out a slow breath, running a hand briefly along the back of his neck, a gesture more human than procedural. "You were right," he admitted, the words quiet but grounded. Naomi did not respond with satisfaction. She simply adjusted her grip on the steering wheel, her posture relaxed but precise, as if every movement carried intention even in stillness. One of the dogs shifted slightly, its ears flicking toward a distant sound, then returning its attention to her without hesitation. Ryan stepped back another pace, clearing the space fully now, not just physically, but symbolically, removing the last trace of the barrier he had placed between them earlier. "Drive safe," he said, the phrase routine, but the tone behind it different, stripped of assumption, carrying a level of respect that had not been there before. Naomi inclined her head once in acknowledgement, then turned the key in the ignition. The engine came to life with a low, steady hum, the vibration subtle but grounding, a return to movement after stillness. She checked her mirrors, her eyes flicking briefly to the side where the street stretched out under dim lights, then back ahead. The dogs settled smoothly into the back seat as she gave a soft, single-word command, their motion controlled, efficient, practiced. Ryan watched as the car eased away from the curb, the tires rolling over the warm asphalt with a quiet sound that faded quickly into the distance. The glow of her taillights lingered for a moment, then disappeared around the corner, leaving the street behind in its natural rhythm once again. For a few seconds, Ryan remained where he was, staring down the empty stretch of road, the night air cooler now against his skin, carrying with it the faint scent of asphalt and something else he could not quite name, something that felt like a shift in perspective more than anything physical. His partner closed the cruiser door and walked back over, glancing in the direction Naomi had gone. "Well," he said, exhaling softly, "that was not what I expected." Ryan gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "No," he replied, his voice low, thoughtful. "It was not." He looked down at the ground for a second, then back up at the street, the image of Naomi standing under the flashing lights replaying in his mind, not as a confrontation, but as a moment of quiet correction, of perspective realigned without force. The radio crackled again, another call coming in, another situation waiting, another decision to be made. Ryan reached up and pressed the button, his voice steady as he responded, but something in the way he stood, in the way he listened, had changed, subtle but permanent, like a line redrawn in a place no one else could see. The night moved on, but the silence she left behind did not feel empty. It felt full, like something important had been placed there, something that would stay long after the sound of sirens and engines faded away. The radio call came in sharper this time, cutting through the quiet like a blade finding its mark. "Unit 12, report of a vehicle matching the updated description near Maple and 3rd. Possible distress call from a civilian. Proceed with caution." Ryan Whitaker did not hesitate. His hand was already on the door handle before the dispatcher finished speaking, his partner moving in sync beside him, the earlier stillness replaced by motion that felt more focused, more deliberate. The cruiser engine turned over with a low growl, headlights cutting a clean path down the street as they pulled away from the curb, tires rolling faster now, the hum of the engine rising just enough to match the urgency in the air. Ryan's grip on the wheel was firm but not tense, his eyes scanning ahead, replaying Naomi Hayes' words in his mind, not as background noise, but as instruction. Details matter. He glanced at the tablet mounted near the dash, the updated vehicle description glowing faintly in the dim light. Dark sedan, plastic plate frame, last seen heading east. His jaw tightened slightly, not in frustration, but in focus, recalibrating his approach with every block they passed. The city around them felt different now, not quieter, but clearer, like the edges of everything had sharpened just enough to notice what had been missed before. Streetlights flickered past in steady intervals, casting long shadows across empty sidewalks. Storefronts closed for the night, windows reflecting the cruiser as it moved through the grid of streets. Maple is 2 blocks up, his partner said, eyes forward, voice steady. Ryan nodded once, easing off the accelerator just slightly as they approached the intersection, the cruiser slowing enough to take in the scene before rushing through it. A lone car idled near the corner, its headlights dim, its position angled just enough to catch attention. Ryan's eyes narrowed, not jumping to conclusions this time, but observing, processing. The color looked darker under the streetlight, just as Naomi had said, the surface absorbing the amber glow instead of reflecting it. He guided the cruiser to a controlled stop several yards behind it, not closing the distance too quickly, not creating the same pressure that had defined the earlier encounter. "Let us take this slow," he said, more to himself than anyone else. But his partner nodded in agreement. They stepped out of the vehicle together, the night air cooler. Here, carrying the faint scent of something metallic mixed with damp concrete. Ryan kept his hands visible, his posture open, his movements measured, each step placed with intention rather than assumption. "Sir," he called out toward the driver's side of the car, his voice firm but not sharp. "Everything all right?" There was a pause, then a figure shifted inside, the door opening slowly, a man stepping out with both hands raised slightly, not in fear, but in uncertainty. Yeah, I am fine," the man said quickly, his voice tired, his eyes flicking between the 2 officers. "Car just stalled on me. I called it in earlier." Ryan's gaze moved over the vehicle, noting the plastic frame around the license plate, the way it caught the light differently, confirming the detail Naomi had pointed out, grounding him further in the moment. "Do you need assistance?" Ryan asked, his tone steady, giving space rather than closing it. The man let out a breath, shoulders dropping slightly. "Yeah, I think the battery is dead. I was waiting for roadside, but they said it might be a while." Ryan nodded, stepping a little closer, but not crowding him, keeping the interaction balanced. "We can help with that," he said. His partner moved back to the cruiser, retrieving a set of jumper cables, the small metallic clink echoing softly in the quiet street. The process was simple, controlled, nothing rushed, nothing forced. As they worked, Ryan found his attention drifting for a second, not away from the task, but toward the shift in how it felt. The same uniform, the same street, the same kind of call, but everything about it had changed. The way he stood, the way he spoke, the way he listened. The engine turned over after a moment, a clean ignition that broke the silence with a steady hum, the driver letting out a relieved laugh. "Man, thank you. I thought I was going to be stuck here all night." Ryan gave a small nod. "You are good to go," he said. The man climbed back into his car, the headlights brightening as he pulled away, disappearing down Maple Street, leaving behind the quiet once again. Ryan stood there for a second, looking at the empty space where the car had been, the street lamp above casting a soft circle of light on the pavement. His partner walked back over, coiling the cables with practiced ease. "Different approach," he said quietly. Ryan nodded, his gaze still forward. "Better outcome," he replied. The words were simple, but they carried weight, the kind that does not fade quickly. In the distance, another call crackled faintly over the radio, another situation waiting, another moment to decide how to step into it. Ryan reached up, pressing the button, his voice steady, but something beneath it grounded in a way it had not been before. As the cruiser lights flickered on again, casting their familiar colors across the street, the night moved forward, but the echo of what Naomi had left behind did not fade. It stayed, quiet and constant, shaping the way he saw everything that came next. The cruiser rolled slowly along Maple Street, its headlights cutting a steady path through the quiet blocks, but Ryan Whitaker's attention was no longer just on the road ahead. It moved between the street and something deeper, something replaying beneath the surface of his thoughts, not loud, not distracting, but persistent. The words stayed with him. Details matter. He adjusted his grip on the wheel slightly, not out of tension, but awareness, the kind that settles in after a moment that does not fade easily. His partner leaned back in the passenger seat, one arm resting near the window, watching the passing storefronts with a calmer expression now, the earlier edge gone. You ever notice how fast things can flip? His partner said quietly, not looking over, just letting the thoughts sit in the space between them. Ryan gave a small nod, eyes still forward. Yeah, he replied, his voice low. Sometimes it is not the situation that changes. It is how we see it. The radio remained quiet for a moment, an unusual pause in a night that had already carried more weight than most. The city around them felt almost still, as if giving space for the shift that had taken place. A few cars passed in the opposite direction, their headlights briefly crossing paths, then disappearing into the distance. Ryan slowed slightly at the next intersection, scanning both directions, not just out of habit, but intention. A figure stood on the corner ahead, a young woman holding a phone, her posture tense, her gaze fixed on the screen as if waiting for something. Ryan eased the cruiser closer, not abrupt, not intrusive, just enough to check. You all right? He called out through the open window, his tone steady, measured. The woman looked up, startled at first, then relaxed slightly. Yeah, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. My ride is just late. Ryan nodded once. All right, stay safe, he said, then continued forward, not lingering, not assuming more than what was there. His partner glanced back briefly. You would have stopped that differently earlier, he said. Ryan did not answer right away. He thought about it, about the way his voice had sounded, the way his stance had been, the way he had approached Naomi Hayes without question, without pause. Yeah, he admitted finally. I would have. The cruiser turned onto another street, the tires making a soft hum against the pavement, the rhythm of the drive steady, controlled. The silence returned, but it was not empty. It carried understanding now, a quiet recalibration that did not need to be spoken out loud. Up ahead, a small diner sat on the corner, its neon sign flickering in and out, casting a faint glow onto the sidewalk. A couple stood outside, laughing softly, their voices barely carrying through the glass. Normal life. Simple moments. Ryan slowed again, not because he needed to, but because he was noticing more, the small details that once blurred together during a shift. The way the light reflected differently on surfaces. The way people moved when they felt safe versus when they did not. The way silence could say more than noise. His partner shifted in his seat. You think we will see her again? He asked, almost casually, but not entirely. Ryan exhaled slowly, his gaze steady ahead. I do not know, he said, but I do not think it matters. His partner raised an eyebrow slightly. How so? Ryan tapped his fingers lightly against the steering wheel once, then let them rest. Because it is not about her being there next time, he said. It is about remembering what she showed us when she was. The words settled into the car, quiet but firm. The radio crackled again, a new call coming through, something routine, something expected. Ryan reached up, pressing the button, his voice calm, grounded. Unit 12, go ahead. As the dispatcher spoke, giving details about a minor traffic issue a few blocks away, Ryan listened fully, not just for the main points, but for the smaller ones, the context, the nuance. He responded clearly, acknowledging each part, then guided the cruiser in that direction, his movements smooth, unhurried, but precise. The night continued, call after call, street after street, but something had shifted in a way that did not reset. It carried forward, quiet but constant, shaping each interaction, each decision, each pause. As they approached the next scene, a simple traffic stop with two vehicles pulled to the side, Ryan slowed earlier than he normally would have, giving himself space to observe before stepping in. He turned off the siren, leaving only the steady flash of the lights, then stepped out of the cruiser with a posture that no longer assumed control, but earned it through presence. His partner followed, matching the pace without needing to be told. The drivers looked up as they approached, their expressions uncertain, waiting. Ryan raised a hand slightly, not as a command, but as reassurance. Let us take a look at what is going on, he said, his tone calm, open. And as the moment unfolded, there was no rush, no escalation, no misunderstanding. Just clarity, just presence, just the quiet application of something learned not through training manuals or procedure, but through a single moment under flashing lights where everything had paused long enough for the truth to be seen. And somewhere beyond the streets, beyond the calls, beyond the routine, The echo of Naomi Hayes remained, not as a memory that faded, but as a standard that stayed, shaping the way the night moved forward, one decision at a time. The cruiser idled quietly at the curb, its lights no longer flashing, just the steady presence of a vehicle at rest under the dim glow of a street lamp. Ryan Whitaker stood, a few feet back from the two drivers he had just spoken with, watching as they exchanged insurance information with calmer hands. Their earlier tension dissolved into something manageable, something human. The air felt different here, lighter, as if the night itself had shifted tone, no longer sharp with uncertainty, but steady, grounded. His partner leaned against the front of the cruiser, arms crossed loosely, observing without stepping in, trusting the space Ryan had created. A car passed slowly on the opposite side of the street, headlights sweeping across the scene for a brief second before moving on, leaving behind the quiet hum of the city settling into its late-hour rhythm. Ryan took a slow breath, the kind that filled his chest without effort, then stepped a little closer to the drivers, his voice calm, even. "Looks like everything is sorted here," he said, not as a command, but as confirmation. One of the drivers nodded quickly, relief clear in his posture. "Yeah, we are good. Just a misunderstanding." Ryan gave a small nod, his eyes moving between them, making sure the moment truly held no hidden tension. "All right," he said. "Take care getting home." They thanked him quietly, gathering their things, stepping back into their cars with a sense of ease that had not been there when he first arrived. As the engines started and the vehicles pulled away in opposite directions, Ryan remained still for a second longer, watching the space they left behind, the empty stretch of road now carrying only the faint reflection of streetlight on asphalt. His partner pushed off the cruiser and walked over, glancing at him with a half-smile. "You handled that clean," he said. Ryan did not respond immediately. His gaze stayed on the road, his thoughts not racing, but moving slowly, deliberately, connecting pieces that had once felt separate. "It was simple," he said finally. His partner let out a soft chuckle. "It always is when you do not complicate it." Ryan nodded slightly, but his expression remained thoughtful, not dismissing the comment, but not fully settling into it either. The radio remained quiet again, an unusual gap that seemed to stretch just enough to let the night breathe. A faint breeze moved through the street, lifting small bits of paper near the curb, carrying them a few feet before letting them settle again. Ryan glanced up at the sky, the stars faint against the city glow, barely visible, but present if you looked long enough. He exhaled slowly, then turned back toward the cruiser, opening the door, but pausing before getting in. Something caught his attention across the street, a subtle movement near the edge of a small park, just beyond the line of trees. At first, it was nothing more than a shape shifting in shadow, but then it resolved into something familiar, something precise. For silhouettes moving in perfect alignment, low and controlled, their steps silent even from a distance. Ryan's breath caught for just a fraction of a second, not from fear, but recognition. Naomi Hayes stepped into the faint light a moment later, her posture as composed as before, her presence calm, grounded, unchanged. The dogs moved with her, not ahead, not behind, but exactly where they needed to be, their focus unwavering. She had changed out of the jacket, now wearing something simpler, but the authority in the way she carried herself had not shifted at all. Ryan did not move toward her. He did not call out. He simply watched, the moment unfolding without interruption. Naomi paused near the edge of the sidewalk, her gaze lifting briefly in his direction, not surprised, not searching, just aware. For a second, the distance between them held everything that had passed earlier, not as tension, but as understanding. She gave the slightest nod, a gesture so small it could have been missed, but it landed with clarity. Ryan returned it, just as subtle, just as quiet. No words were needed. The dogs remained still beside her, their presence steady, their discipline unchanged, the same silent strength that had shifted everything before. Naomi turned then, continuing down the sidewalk, her pace unhurried, her path clear. The silhouettes moved with her, fading gradually into the darker stretch beyond the park, their forms blending into the night until they were no longer visible, leaving behind only the faint impression of movement that had already passed. Ryan stood there for another second, the image settling into something deeper than memory, something closer to understanding. His partner stepped beside him, following his gaze. "That her?" he asked quietly. Ryan nodded once. "Yeah." His partner watched the empty sidewalk for a moment, then let out a slow breath. "You think she knows?" Ryan tilted his head slightly, considering, then gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I think she always did." The words hung there, not heavy, not light, just true. Ryan finally stepped into the cruiser, the door closing with a soft click that echoed lightly in the quiet street. The engine turned over again, the familiar hum returning, but it no longer carried the same weight it had at the beginning of the night. As they pulled away, the street lamp flickered once more, then steadied, casting a consistent glow over the empty road, as if nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The cruiser moved steadily through the quiet streets, the soft hum of the engine blending into the rhythm of the night. But Ryan Whitaker's mind was no longer tracking the road in the same automatic way it had at the start of his shift. Every intersection felt different now. Every shadow held more detail. Every passing car carried more context than just shape and speed. He slowed slightly as they approached a four-way stop, not because of traffic, but because something in him had learned to pause before deciding. The street was empty, the stop sign catching the light in a dull red reflection, the paint slightly worn at the edges, something he might not have noticed before. He rolled forward, then continued on, his movements controlled, intentional. His partner sat quietly beside him for a while, watching the road, then finally spoke. "You ever think about how close that could have gone a different way?" His voice was not accusatory, not even heavy, just honest. Ryan did not answer right away. He let the question sit, not avoiding it, not rushing to resolve it. The memory of Naomi Hayes standing under those flashing lights returned again, not as tension, but as clarity, the way she had not raised her voice, not stepped back, not escalated anything, just held the moment still until it revealed itself. "Yeah," Ryan said finally, his voice low. "Closer than I like." The cruiser passed under another streetlight, the glow sliding across the windshield and fading just as quickly, like each moment offering a glimpse before moving on. The radio crackled faintly, but no call came through, just static, just the background noise of a system always running. Up ahead, a small gas station sat open, its fluorescent lights casting a stark white glow across the pavement, making everything look sharper, colder. A man stood near the pump, looking down at his phone, his shoulders slightly hunched, his posture closed off. Ryan slowed again, not pulling in, just observing as they passed. The man glanced up briefly, making eye contact for a split second, then looked away, his body language shifting just slightly. Ryan noticed it immediately, the way tension can show up in small movements, in posture, in silence. He kept driving, not stopping, not assuming, just registering. "You saw that?" his partner asked quietly. Ryan nodded once. "Yeah." His partner leaned back slightly. "Before, we probably would have turned in." Ryan's grip on the wheel loosened just a fraction. "Maybe," he said. But there was nothing there yet. The distinction hung in the air, subtle but important. Not everything needed to be turned into something. Not every moment required intervention. Sometimes, presence without pressure was enough. They drove another block in silence, the city stretching out around them in quiet lines and dim lights, each street carrying its own story, its own pace. Ryan's eyes moved more now, not scanning for threats, but reading the environment, the way light reflected off surfaces, the way people moved, the way stillness could mean calm or tension depending on how you looked at it. The cruiser turned onto a narrower street, lined with parked cars on both sides, the space tighter, the margins smaller. A porch light flickered on one of the houses, illuminating a small set of steps and a pair of shoes left neatly by the door. Ryan slowed again, not out of caution alone, but awareness, the kind that came from seeing more than just the obvious. His partner glanced over. "You are driving different," he said. Ryan let out a small breath, almost a quiet laugh. "I think I am seeing different," he replied. The words felt simple, but they carried weight, the kind that settles deeper than explanation. The radio finally came alive again, a new call coming through, something minor, a noise complaint a few blocks away. Ryan listened carefully, not just to the main details, but to the tone, the context, the way it was described. He acknowledged the call, then guided the cruiser in that direction, his movements smooth, unhurried, but precise. As they approached the address, he slowed earlier than usual, parking a short distance away instead of pulling directly up. The house was quiet, a single light on inside, no visible disturbance. Ryan stepped out of the cruiser, his posture open, his movements calm, not rushing in, not assuming the worst. He walked up the path, each step measured, each breath steady. He knocked on the door, not loud, not aggressive, just enough to be heard. There was a pause. Then the door opened slowly, revealing an older woman, her expression tired but not alarmed. "Evening," Ryan said gently. "We got a call about some noise. Everything okay here?" The woman blinked, then gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. "Oh, that was probably my television," she said. "I must have turned it up too loud." Ryan nodded once, not pressing, not escalating. "No problem," he said. "Just wanted to check." She thanked him softly, closing the door with a quiet click. Ryan stepped back, the night settling around him again, calm, undisturbed. As he returned to the cruiser, his partner looked at him with a knowing expression. "Different outcome," he said. Ryan nodded, sliding into the driver's seat. "Better approach," he replied. The engine started again, the hum steady, familiar, but everything about how the night moved now felt different, shaped by something that had not been taught in training, not written in any manual, but learned in a single moment where stillness had spoken louder than anything else. And as they drove on, the city unfolding ahead of them, Ryan Whitaker carried that lesson forward, not as a memory, but as a way of seeing, a way of being, one quiet decision at a time. The cruiser turned slowly onto a wider avenue, the city opening up around them in longer stretches of road and brighter clusters of light. But the rhythm inside the vehicle remained steady, grounded, almost quiet in a way that did not match the late hour. Ryan Whitaker eased his foot off the accelerator just slightly, not out of caution, but control, the kind that came from choosing pace instead of reacting to it. The glow from storefront windows reflected across the windshield, shifting patterns of light that moved across his hands on the wheel, across the dashboard, across the space between him and his partner. "Dispatch to Unit 12. The radio cut in, clearer this time, sharper than the earlier calls, carrying a tone that signaled something more than routine. Ryan reached up immediately, pressing the button. "Unit 12, go ahead," he said, his voice steady, but attentive. "We have a report of a disturbance near Riverside Park," the dispatcher said. Caller mentioned raised voices, possible confrontation. No further details. "Units nearby are tied up. You are the closest." Ryan's eyes shifted forward, narrowing slightly as he processed the limited information. No details, no clear threat, just a possibility. He nodded once, even though the dispatcher could not see him. "Unit 12 responding," he said, then released the button and adjusted the cruiser's direction, turning smoothly onto the next street leading toward the park. His partner straightened slightly in his seat, the earlier calm giving way to focus. "Riverside at this hour," he said quietly. "Could be anything." Ryan did not respond right away. His gaze stayed on the road, but his mind moved through the possibilities without attaching to any one of them. "Exactly," he said after a moment. The cruiser picked up speed, but not aggressively, just enough to close the distance while maintaining control. Streetlights thinned as they approached the park, the glow becoming softer, more spaced out, shadows stretching longer between them. The trees lining the sidewalk created dark pockets. Where visibility dropped, shapes blending into one another until they resolved again under the next light. Ryan slowed as they neared the entrance, easing the cruiser to the curb instead of pulling directly into the center of the scene. "We walk from here," he said, already unbuckling his seatbelt. His partner nodded, understanding without needing explanation. They stepped out into cooler air, the faint scent of grass and damp soil replacing the sharper city smells from earlier. The park was quiet at first glance, the pathways empty, benches unoccupied, the distant outline of a fountain barely visible in the low light. But then there was sound. Not loud, not chaotic, just raised enough to carry. Two voices, overlapping slightly, not yelling, but tight, strained, the kind that sits just below escalation. Ryan paused for half a second, listening, letting the direction of the sound guide him instead of rushing toward it. "This way," he said quietly, moving along the path with measured steps, his partner a pace behind. The gravel beneath their boots made a soft crunch, But Ryan adjusted his pace instinctively, minimizing the noise, approaching without announcing tension before understanding it. As they rounded a bend, the figures came into view. Two men standing near a bench, one with his hands moving as he spoke, the other standing rigid, arms at his sides, posture tight. No sudden movements. No visible threat. Just pressure building in the space between them. Ryan did not step in immediately. He slowed, observing, taking in the details, the distance between them, the tone of their voices, the way their bodies were positioned. Details matter. He moved forward only when he understood enough to enter without shifting the balance unnecessarily. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, his voice calm, even, not loud, but clear enough to reach them without cutting through the moment. Both men turned, their attention shifting instantly, the tension redirecting, not disappearing, but changing focus. Ryan raised a hand slightly, not as a command, but as a signal. "Let us take a breath here," he said, his tone steady, grounded. The man who had been speaking paused, his hands lowering. Slowly, the energy in his movements easing just enough to create space. The other man exhaled, a visible release of pressure that had been building in his chest. Ryan stepped closer, but not between them, not positioning himself as a barrier, just present, just within reach of the moment. "Talk to me," he said, his voice still calm, inviting clarity instead of forcing it. The explanation came in pieces, overlapping at first, then separating as Ryan guided the conversation with small nods, simple questions, allowing each to speak without interruption. A misunderstanding, a disagreement over something minor that had grown under the weight of tone and assumption. Ryan listened, not rushing to resolve, not imposing a conclusion, just holding the space steady until the tension began to settle on its own. His partner remained just behind, mirroring the posture, reinforcing the calm without adding pressure. After a few minutes, the voices lowered completely, the edges of frustration smoothing into something manageable, something human again. One of the men let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "This got out of hand," he admitted. The other nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, it did." Ryan gave a small nod, his expression neutral but present. "It happens," he said simply. "What matters is how it ends." The words landed softly, without judgment, but with weight. The two men exchanged a glance, then stepped back from each other, the distance now intentional, respectful. Ryan waited a second longer, making sure the shift held, then stepped back himself, signaling the end of the moment without needing to say it. "Have a good night," he said. They echoed it back, their voices calm now, the earlier tension gone. As Ryan and his partner walked back toward the cruiser, the park returned to its quiet state, the fountain's faint trickle the only sound filling the space. His partner glanced over. "You did not push that," he said. Ryan shook his head slightly. "Did not need to," he replied. They reached the cruiser, the door opening with a soft click, the engine starting again with its familiar hum. As they pulled away from the park, the trees fading into the background, Ryan's gaze remained steady, his movements controlled, his approach unchanged. The night continued, call after call, street after street, but the difference was no longer in the situation. It was in him. And that difference, quiet as it was, changed everything. The cruiser drifted out of the park district and back into the grid of city streets. The transition almost seamless, but Ryan Whitaker felt it anyway. The subtle shift from open space to tighter lanes, from quiet shadows to structured light. He kept his speed steady, not rushing to the next call, not dragging his pace either, just moving with intention, like every decision now had a weight he was willing to carry. The radio remained silent for a few blocks, and for once, the silence did not feel like a gap waiting to be filled. It felt like space. His partner adjusted in his seat, glancing out the window as a late-night bus passed by, its interior lights revealing tired faces, people heading home, people ending their own long days. "You ever think about how many versions of a story we walk into every night?" his partner asked quietly. Ryan kept his eyes forward, watching the bus disappear into the distance. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "And how easy it is to pick the wrong one if you rush it." The words settled between them, not heavy, just real. Up ahead, a flashing yellow light marked a pedestrian crossing, the paint on the asphalt slightly faded, the lines not as sharp as they used to be. Ryan slowed instinctively, even though no one was crossing, even though the street looked clear. It was not about what he saw. It was about what he might not see yet. As they rolled through, a figure stepped off the curb on the far side, just a second later than expected, moving at a slow pace, carrying a small bag, head slightly down. Ryan stopped completely, giving the person space, not inching forward, not signaling impatience. The figure looked up briefly, surprised, then gave a small nod of thanks before continuing across. Ryan nodded back, even though the person had already turned away. His partner watched the moment, then gave a quiet exhale. "You are not missing things anymore," he said. Ryan's hands rested lightly on the wheel. "I was not missing them before," he replied. "I just was not seeing them." The distinction lingered, quiet but clear. The radio crackled suddenly, sharper than before, cutting through the calm with urgency that had been absent for the last few calls. Unit 12, respond to a report near Oak and 7th. Caller states a woman is being followed, appears distressed. No further details. Ryan's posture shifted immediately, not tense, but focused, the calm remaining, but now directed. Unit 12 responding. He said into the radio, his voice steady, controlled. He turned the cruiser smoothly, the engine picking up just enough to close the distance, the city lights stretching into lines as they moved faster through the streets. His partner straightened beside him, eyes scanning ahead. "Oak and 7th is coming up," he said. Ryan nodded, already easing off the accelerator as they approached, not rushing into the scene, not repeating the mistake of assumption. The intersection came into view under a cluster of streetlights, casting a wider pool of visibility across the sidewalk and road. And then he saw her. A woman walking quickly along the edge of the sidewalk, her movements tight, her shoulders slightly raised, her head turning just enough to check behind her without fully looking. A few yards back, a man walked in the same direction, not running, not closing the distance quickly, but not falling away either. Ryan slowed the cruiser to a stop a short distance ahead, positioning it without blocking the path, without escalating the space. "We approach calm," he said quietly, more to himself than his partner, but the intent was clear. They stepped out of the cruiser together, Ryan moving first, his posture open, his hands visible, his voice measured as he called out, "Ma'am, are you all right?" The woman turned sharply at the sound, her expression tense, then shifting slightly as she registered the uniform, the presence, the tone. "I think so," she said, her voice uncertain, her eyes flicking briefly toward the man behind her. Ryan nodded once, stepping slightly to the side rather than directly between them, creating space without drawing a hard line. "Let us slow this down," he said gently. He turned his attention to the man, his gaze steady but not aggressive. "Sir, can you stop there for a moment?" The man paused, lifting his hands slightly, not defensive, just acknowledging. "Yeah, I can," he said. His voice was calm, not matching the tension of the moment, which made Ryan pause internally, recalibrating again. Details matter. Ryan shifted his attention back to the woman. "Do you know him?" he asked, his tone neutral, not assuming either answer. The woman hesitated, then shook her head slightly. "No, I just noticed him behind me for a few blocks." Ryan nodded once, then looked back at the man. "Can you explain where you are heading tonight?" he asked. The man gestured lightly down the street. "I live that way," he said. "I was just walking home from work. I did not even realize I was close behind her." His tone was steady, his posture relaxed, no signs of pressure or intent beyond what he said. Ryan held the moment for a second, letting the information settle, not rushing to decide, not forcing a conclusion. He looked at the woman again, her posture still tight, her breathing a little quick, then back at the man, who remained still, patient. "All right," Ryan said finally, his voice calm. "Here is what we are going to do. Sir, I am going to ask you to take a different route for now, just to give her space. Ma'am, we will stay here with you until you feel comfortable continuing." The man nodded immediately. "That is fine," he said, stepping back without hesitation, turning down a side street without argument. The woman's shoulders lowered slightly as the distance grew, her posture easing as the tension dissipated. Ryan stayed where he was, not crowding her, not rushing her. "You are okay," he said quietly. She nodded, taking a slow breath, the kind that steadies after a moment passes. "Thank you," she said. Ryan gave a small nod. "Take your time," he replied. The street returned to its quiet rhythm. the earlier tension fading into the background, replaced by something calmer, something resolved without force. And standing there under the streetlight, Ryan Whitaker felt it again, the quiet shift, the confirmation that the way he stepped into a moment could change how it ended, not through control, but through clarity, through presence, through the simple choice to see before acting. The woman's breathing slowed gradually, each inhale deeper than the last, her shoulders lowering inch by inch until the tension that had once held her frame tight finally released into something steadier. Ryan Whitaker remained a few feet away, not stepping closer, not stepping back, simply holding his position in a way that gave her space without leaving her alone. The streetlight above cast a soft, steady glow over the sidewalk, illuminating the quiet scene in a way that felt almost deliberate, like a moment placed under a lens for clarity. His partner stood off to the side, posture relaxed but attentive, eyes scanning the area not for threat, but for context, for anything that might shift the balance again. "You okay to keep going?" Ryan asked gently, his voice low, grounded. The woman nodded, brushing her hand lightly along her jacket as if resetting herself. "Yeah," she said, her tone more certain now. "I think I just got in my head a little." Ryan gave a small nod, not dismissing the feeling, not correcting it. "That happens," he said simply. The words landed without judgment, without minimizing what she had felt, just acknowledging it as real. She took one more steady breath, then adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. "Thank you for stopping," she added quietly. Ryan met her gaze for a brief second, then nodded again. "Of course," he replied. She turned and continued down the sidewalk, her pace more even now, her steps no longer tight or hurried, but steady, controlled. Ryan watched for a moment, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to be sure the shift held, that the moment had truly settled into something safe. When she reached the next corner and turned out of sight, he finally exhaled, the breath leaving him slower than it had entered. His partner stepped closer, hands resting lightly on his hips. "You gave her space without leaving her exposed," he said, his tone thoughtful. Ryan looked down the street where the man had disappeared earlier, then back to where the woman had walked. "Both of them just needed clarity," he replied. "Not pressure." The distinction lingered, quiet but firm. The radio crackled again, softer this time. A routine update passing through the channel, nothing urgent, nothing pressing. Ryan reached up, acknowledging it briefly, then let his hand fall back to his side. The night felt balanced again, not empty, but steady, like a scale that had been tipped and then carefully brought back to center. He turned toward the cruiser, the door still open, the interior light casting a faint glow onto the pavement. Before stepping in, he paused, his gaze drifting across the street, taking in the details one more time. The way the light reflected off the curb, the faint movement of leaves near the edge of the sidewalk, the quiet stillness that now felt complete instead of tense. His partner watched him for a second, then spoke again. "You know," he said, "earlier tonight, that situation would have gone different. Not just with her, but here too." Ryan did not deny it. He did not need to. "Yeah," he said, his voice calm. "It would have." He rested his hand on the top of the cruiser door, feeling the cool metal under his palm, grounding, familiar. "But it did not," his partner added. Ryan nodded slightly. "No," he said, "it did not." The simplicity of the statement carried more weight than anything else they had said. He stepped into the driver's seat, the door closing with a soft, controlled click. The engine started again, the hum steady, consistent, the same as it had been all night, but everything about how he moved within it had changed. He pulled the cruiser back onto the street, the tires rolling smoothly over the asphalt, the city opening up ahead in lines of light and shadow. The radio remained quiet for a few seconds, then came alive with another call, another situation waiting to unfold. Ryan listened, his focus sharp, but not rushed, his attention wide enough to take in more than just the surface. He responded clearly, then adjusted their route, guiding the cruiser forward with the same steady control he had carried since the moment everything shifted. As they moved through the streets, passing under lights that flickered and steadied, through intersections that opened and closed behind them, Ryan Whitaker carried something with him that had not been there before. Not a lesson written in words, not a rule to follow, something quieter, something deeper, a way of seeing that did not rely on assumption, A way of stepping into a moment without forcing it to become something it was not. And as the night continued, one call blending into the next, one street leading into another, that quiet shift remained, shaping every decision, every pause, every word spoken or held back. Not loud, not visible, but constant. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the reach of the cruiser lights, beyond the rhythm of the radio, the echo of a woman who had stood still when everything else moved too fast remained, not as a memory, but as a presence, guiding the way forward without ever needing to be seen again. The cruiser slowed as the sky began to shift, the deep navy of night softening into a muted gray along the horizon, the first hint of morning pressing gently against the edges of the city. Ryan Whitaker rested his hands lightly on the steering wheel, the long stretch of road ahead nearly empty now, traffic reduced to the occasional passing car, headlights dim against the growing light. The radio had gone quiet again, not with tension this time, but with completion, as if the night itself was winding down, releasing its hold one call at a time. His partner leaned back in his seat, eyes half on the road, half on the skyline ahead. "Shift is almost over," he said quietly, not as a statement of relief, but acknowledgement. Ryan nodded once, his gaze steady. "Yeah," he replied. The word carried more than just the end of hours. It carried the weight of everything that had unfolded within them. They passed by the same stretch of road where the night had begun, the familiar intersection coming into view, the street lamp still standing in its place, now flickering less under the soft approach of daylight. Ryan eased off the accelerator, not out of necessity, but instinct, his eyes scanning the space with a different awareness than before. The asphalt looked the same. The curb, the sidewalk, the quiet storefronts. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. He pulled the cruiser to a slow stop at the edge of the street, the engine idling softly as he looked out through the windshield, his reflection faintly visible in the glass, layered over the scene ahead. His partner glanced over. "You thinking about it?" he asked. Ryan did not need clarification. He gave a small nod. "Yeah," he said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence did not feel empty. It felt complete, like a conversation that had already said everything it needed to without words. Ryan's eyes moved to the exact spot where Naomi Hayes had stood, where the red and blue lights had once painted the pavement in sharp color, where the air had held tension so tightly it felt like it might break. Now, under the soft gray light of early morning, it was just a street again. Quiet. Ordinary. He exhaled slowly, the breath steady, measured. "You know," his partner said after a moment. She never raised her voice. Ryan's jaw shifted slightly, the memory clear. "She did not need to," he replied. The simplicity of it settled deep, not as something impressive, but something undeniable. They sat there for another second, the city slowly waking around them, a distant door opening somewhere, the faint sound of a car starting, life returning in quiet layers. Ryan reached up and turned off the cruiser's overhead lights completely, leaving only the natural light to fill the space, the artificial urgency replaced by something softer, more real. He shifted the car back into drive, easing forward, not rushing away from the moment, but moving through it with intention. As they drove, the streets began to fill slightly. A few more cars, a few more people stepping out into the early morning, the world resetting in its own quiet way. Ryan's posture remained steady, his movements controlled, his attention wide, not locked onto a single point, but open to everything around him. His partner watched him for a second, then gave a small nod to himself, as if recognizing something without needing to say it. "You are different," he said finally. Ryan did not look over. "Maybe," he replied. His partner let out a soft breath. "Not maybe," he said. Ryan considered that, not rejecting it, not fully accepting it either. "I am paying attention," he said after a moment. The distinction mattered. His partner smiled faintly, then looked back out at the road. "That is a start." They drove on, the cruiser blending into the flow of the waking city, no longer the center of attention, just part of the movement, part of the rhythm. The radio crackled one last time, a routine sign-off from dispatch, marking the end of the shift. Ryan reached up, acknowledging it, his voice calm, grounded. "Unit 12, copy. End of shift." The words felt final, not in a heavy way, but in a complete one. As they pulled into the station lot, the morning light settling fully now, Ryan parked the cruiser and turned off the engine, the hum fading into silence. He sat there for a second, hands resting on the wheel, the stillness wrapping around him one last time before the shift truly ended. His partner opened his door, stepping out, stretching slightly, but Ryan remained seated for a moment longer. His eyes drifted forward, not seeing the lot, not seeing the building, but something else entirely. A woman standing still under flashing lights. A moment held long enough to change everything. He blinked once, then stepped out of the cruiser, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The day had begun. The night was over. But what stayed with him was not the calls, not the reports, not the routine. It was something quieter, something steady, something that did not need to be spoken out loud. He mocked her without knowing who she was. But in the end, she showed him how to see.